What's the worst thing you've ever tasted? Not me, but I made spaghetti once a few months back in the early fall, and I guess after the initial plates, I left it to cool uncovered so I could put the leftovers away. So the next day my husband is enjoying some spaghetti for lunch when Crunchy bit into a stink bug that had landed in it. If you know how badly a stink bug smells, you can only imagine how bad it tastes. My husband was projectile vomiting within 5 minutes, and it's been months and he won't let me make spaghetti anymore because it reminds him of it. I cannot fathom how bad that must have tasted. A cheese ball at this church lady's house, one of my grandma's friends. It tasted like dirty socks that a cat had been playing with for months. But I have never laughed as hard as I did that day. I, stupidly, asked my then 11-year-old sister, how is on the spectrum, and thus has problems modulating her voice, if she had had a cheese bee. Or, she proceeds to effectively yell, yeah, it tasted like a bud's foot. The look of death we got from that old lady. Addie, die. Why? Brussels sprout flavored Jones soda. From the holiday pack about 15 years ago. Yes. My friends and I bought that pack and all took turns trying the sodas. We saved the Brussels sprout one for last, and it's good we did, because we all vomited. We were in my friend's kitchen, and he went first and vomited in the sink. Then another guy I went and ran out the back door and puked in a bush. Then I went and puked in the bush next to the other bush. It was quite a ride. When I was super young, probably way too young to be going down to the lake near our house on my own, I came across this black thing on the ground. I couldn't figure out what it was, but it looked like a delicious chestnut, like the ones my mom would bring home in huge bags to both snack on and feed squirrels with. So I did what any sensible pre-kindergartner would do and took a bite. It was not a chestnut. To this day I can't imagine what it was, but it was the absolute worst tasting thing I've ever put in my mouth. I still remember crying as I was walking all the way back home. Sure, had been poisoned and was going to die. Edit, chestnuts not as nuts. A lightning bug, firefly. I was running through the garden at dusk and one flew into my mouth. It was disgusting. Very chemical. This is so nostalgic to me. Exclamation mark. I used to catch them all the time as a kid in my aunt's amazing garden, and the smell left behind after letting them go was so distinct I could taste it. Just like you said, super chemical. A properly ripened persimmon, in my opinion, is really good, but one year around Christmas I got one that must have been underripe or something, because it tasted good for 0.02 seconds before the texture turned into literal sand and sucked every particle of moisture out of your mouth. Literally the worst thing ever. One time I chewed on a gel Advil. It had some kind of liquid inside that numbed my mouth and my throat, and I thought I was gonna die. It was so bitter too. I used to take some antidepressant pill, and it just barely scraped one of my sharp canine teeth. And it tasted horrible, like my mouth was just dying or something for almost 30 minutes. Water and milk made it even worse. Once I popped some electrolyte/mineral pills in my mouth and started chomping away on my way to the gym. I thought I had grabbed my almonds. They began foaming and tasted extremely bitter and sour at the same time. I thought I was getting poisoned. Also once tried an olive straight off a tree. Also tasted like poison. Don't recommend. Okay, first paragraph cracked me TF up. I can imagine the brief moment of panic you had when you thought you were being poisoned, LMAO. Second paragraph is a till. I recently bought an olive tree and I've wondered this. So damn now I know that I have to do extra sugato them when the tree eventually produces them. Lol. This clear liquid medicine I had to take as a kid when I was diagnosed with a polio-like disease called Coxsackie. The name is funny. I don't even remember the effects. But that medicine legit tasted like battery acid or something. Holof decided to name the disease Coxsackie. The glue they use on temporary dental crowns is extremely rude. When I was young, my grandparents on my dad's side spent every Christmas Eve at our house. It was great, except my grandma's contribution to the dinner, which was an awful dish called tomato aspic. It is basically tomato juice jello, and is every bit as awful as it sounds. The whole family hated it, but my grandma couldn't cook, and did the best she could. I remember being 10 and tried sneaking some to my dog that would eat everything from socks to dog poop. He growled at me and bared his teeth. If a dog that eats poop and licks his own butthole tells you to get that crap away from him, you don't eat it either. Umbilical cord blood from a complete stranger. Not even lying. I used to be a paramedic and had to deliver a baby in the field once. I did everything exactly how I was taught in school and clamped the cord down and proceeded to cut it with my scalpel. They neglected to teach us in school that the clamped part of the cord is still under pressure. Blood squirted in my mouth, on my shirt, and on my pants. So I basically had to suction a newborn baby and stimulate her while savoring the taste of the same nutrients that kept her alive the past 9 months. To make matters worse, the mom wouldn't name the baby after me. TL. Doctor basically drank baby's blood. A Slim Shady. It was a drink I ordered from a bar in Singapore. A shot of warm bourbon poured into a warm half pint of Murphy's. The temperature in Singapore, as you can imagine, is something akin to being in a hot oven all day all night all year round. Even breathing is difficult. As a tourist you get hot and thirsty. I think that's the only drink in my life I just said fudge it after one sip. I ordered it. I'll pay for it, but bring me a cold water to get that sugar out of my mouth please. Goddamn. I live in Singapore and have to disagree with your point about the weather. Sometimes it rains, so it feels like it's being in a food steamer instead of an oven. One time I was in the very early stages of pregnancy. I had been taking fish oil supplements. I had morning sickness really bad during this pregnancy. I burped not long after taking this pill and the taste was horrible. Dead fish. It was so nasty I immediately threw up, catching it in my hands as I ran to the sink. I was eating a hard-boiled egg. I bit into the egg and my mouth was filled with what I can only describe as a mouthful of wet dirty pigeon. I looked down and found a chicken fetus. It had feathers and everything, and it was the only time I almost puked from food. For 35 years, post-war to about 1985, my grandfather worked in a lab developing new cake mixes for donuts and other cake stuffs. After retiring, my grandfather would make weekly trips to the old plant/lab for a visit. While there he would often be given as many paper bags of plain vanilla donuts, which were the test batches for the day. If I recall, the lab always produced an entire rack of material to test the new mixtures. Most went to trash because people who at work there could only take home so much. When I visited my grandparents' house during that period, I'd also on a weekly basis seize many of those bags would be handed down to me. I probably only ate about 2 to 3 donuts per week. One day, I got into my car to go to a matinee movie with school friends, and I brought a donut with me. Once moving, I grabbed the donut from passenger seat and bit into it as normal. What happened next? Almost caused a motor vehicle accident. The taste of this one bite was the most revolting thing I had ever, or since, experienced. It sent signals to my brain that I must evacuate this material from my mouth immediately. I stopped the car in the middle of the road in order to open the door and spit that vile sugar out onto the road. I also threw that donut as far into the distance as possible. I was completely disgusted, but finished my mission of going to the movies. Next time I was at grandparents' house, I mentioned this crazy experience I had with one of the donuts, and the fact I threw out the entire batch, thinking it was actual poison. He thought about it for not more than a moment and a smile ran across his face. One of his former lab worker colleagues had intended that donut, or that bag perhaps, for him. He indicated it was an old workplace prank to add this vile, but very much non-poison, chemical to the mix to punk the other staff. After telling me all this, he looked me in the eye and said, "That sugar is pretty fucking evil, isn't it?" We had a good laugh. I guess I can never know with certainty whether he arranged that for me, but from what I know of him, his practical jokes didn't typically have such a nasty effect. I believe him more than his colleagues. I can still taste it in my mind a little bit. That is how horrible that taste was. Grandpa has been gone since 1997. This all happened in 1987. I would taste that cigar willingly one more time if I could only laugh with him about it just a once more. I'm doing that anyway. Why? But be better within present. Bonus fact, starting in 1970-ish, the cake mixes this company designed were widely used by Tim Hortons when that company still made all donuts in-house. Not sure exactly, but around the late 90s or early zeros Hortons started to buy pre-made donuts and merely warmed them for customers on demand. Extra bonus fact, the car in question was my first 1962 hardtop Thunderbird. Could it have been Beatrix? It's the stuff that they put on Nintendo Switch cartridges to stop kids from eating them. It's supposedly the single most bitter substance on the planet. Apparently a teaspoon in an Olympic-sized swimming pool makes the water too bitter to drink. Completely non-toxic, too. And the timeline adds up. One time I went into an apartment of a Dexist lady, died in her bath. I was an EMT. I could taste her. Been there in the summer heat for 2-ish weeks. Flies everywhere. I stayed with some friends one summer during high school and the mom did not cook. It was a known thing. She grew up wealthy and married down into the middle class. One night she made something that was cream of mushroom soup, cooked in a casserole dish with fennel seeds, crushed up Ritz crackers and rice, but it all soaked together into a single consistency. The taste still haunts me. One time I was eating a bag of chips, I think they were Doritos, while driving late at night. It was dark, so I couldn't really see what I was eating. Turns out in the bag there was a big concentrated clump of flavoring dust that formed somehow. Popped that whole sucker right in my mouth. Big mistake. You might think it would just taste like chip dust, but no. It tasted like dirt and pain. It's like there was so much condensed flavor that my brain had an integer overflow error. I nearly drove off the road. So if you ever find something like that at the bottom of a bag of chips, I strongly advise not trying anything more than a little nibble of it. A daddy long legs and his web. When I woke up at 5 AM hungover AF, he made a web and chilled over my water cup that had been out for a few days. It's been 15 years. I still look at the openings of my drinks before I drink them. Even when I just opened it. I'm unreasonably terrified of those things. If this happened to me, I would be a walking vegetable for the rest of my life. I once ate a soft cheese that tasted like band-aids, plasters. Why do I know what that tastes like? I guess from pulling them off my finger with my teeth? I don't know, but that cheese was straight band-aids. Once when I was like 14 or so I got some sort of stomach bug, and I was throwing up for 24 hours. I emptied my stomach totally, and was still retching. About the third or fourth trip on an empty stomach I vomited green bile. I'm still haunted by how disgusting that tasted. Hydrofluoric acid alkylation units in refineries have a smell that you can taste. To me it was a mix between old broccoli and rusty pennies. And it would stain your sinuses all day. I find it similar, but not the same, as the smell/taste of paper factories, like sewage, only more foul somehow. The disgusting beans from the Bean Boozled challenge. Seriously, how TF do they get those nasty ass flavors? Skittles had a zombie mix this year and they somehow managed to get the nasty flavor of death inside a pretty candy shell. Reminded me of Bean Boozled. Big differences, that I didn't know my Skittles were tainted, and the complete surprise horrible taste made it even worse. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.